tough to like kind of get into, definitely. Hey, hyena spots, moths, hi there. So this is just a little bit of preamble before I go into the actual stories, so we can give some people some time to, you know, filter in and stuff. I know that my lead-in is a short couple of minutes, rather than like a long 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever. So we're just doing a little bit of my own rambling before we move into the actual stories. This was another one-shot. Oh, yeah. Yeah, this was like a 24-hour one-shot. The character is related in some way to the character from the first game, and will be related in some way to the character for the release. So there's like some setup story with the first two games, like 2 one-shots that like have some history in the game world, but that like the full release is coming soon, and these past characters from these other games will mean something to the main game, is like sort of what we've been told, what the plan is, I think. So that's cool. I like the idea of that. There were probably about like 30 no, not 30, like 25, 22 players, if I'm just like trying to remember off the top of my head. It wasn't a hugely populated game, but that's because we were also in a hall, so it was all a hall event. I'll explain more about that when we get into the actual stories, which I guess we can do. Yeah. Let's do that. Let's do some LARP stories. Let me just like order my thoughts here, figure out where I should start, what we're doing, and go on with it. Okay. So, now we shall regale the tales of the second Chronicles LARP beta game. Now, Chronicles is a system developed by my lovely friend, Will, that I'm very excited about playing. It is different from Underworld and from the other stories that I've told in certain ways, in that, like, the way that resource management works is different. So, the game doesn't rely on a, like, per-day system for spells or, like, a per-day system for skills. It relies more on a focus system. So you have sort of, like, a mana pool for your skills, and every 15 minutes or so, you get some of that back if you're resting. You know what I mean? So each fight can be as high intensity, as full of skills, as usable as possible. And I'm really excited by that idea, because it sucks when you're like a warrior and, you know, you have one slay, like one massive attack that you can do, and then for some reason you can only do that once a day, so you can't do it anymore after that. Whereas with focus, it makes it sort of like, oh, well, you take a rest, you get your focus back, and then you can go again, sort of thing. So it's more about like being tired, and it creates like a better immersion, I think. Only in that, like, you can say, oh, I can't do it because I'm tired, rather than like, I can't do it because I've already done it, you know? So I don't know. It feels more suitable to like every fight being matched up against players in a way that matches up to their strongest skills, not to, oh, we'll just like throw some lowball goblins out there because we know that they've used all their skills, kind of thing. Like each fight can be sort of strong, sort of effective against players, right? So I'm happy about that. That's a thing that I like about Chronicles. There are a lot of other things that are different, but mostly I'm going to tell stories, and the mechanics, you know, they'll come into play when they come into play, but mostly I'm just going to tell stories from the LARP and like what we did. But I needed to preface that so that you knew the mechanical differences a little bit. So this was a one-shot of Chronicles, beta. So this was the second game, and this was the game where we were told before we went in, this is the deadly game. This is the scary one. This is where we test the death system. You know, and lore-wise, this is where resurrection first happens in the world. So, like, there's a little bit of a lore reason for this to be here. There's a little bit of a setup, which is awesome. I'm really into it. You know, as a thing, I like to have these one-shots, like, mean something to the story. Like, the previous one was sort of like, when we fought the god of corruption and, you know, sent him into a 500-year battle with our champion. You know, the previous beta game, which there are stories for on my YouTube, which you can check out if you want to. But we were told this is going to be the scary one. And when we were saying to Will that we're going to come, so, you know, the event's up and we go like, oh, I'm interested in coming to the game, you know, then Will would send us a you know, pick a number between 1 and 10. You pick a number, and then he assigns you the level of your character. So not only was it a deadly game, the levels of characters within it were disparate. So some people were lower leveled and some people were higher leveled to sort of mimic that like long running LARP feel of having different power leveled characters all in the same place, up against, you know, dangerous things, that kind of stuff. So I ended up with a level 8 character. I don't know where on the scale of the game that necessarily lies, but it's fairly high, I think, in terms of like what people were being assigned. I ended up with a level 8 character, and I made a Havela. And the Havela are Fae from beyond the Veil. And the Veil is sort of this mysterious realm of dreams and nightmares. This place that your spirit passes into when you die, you know? All this kind of stuff. And these are sort of Fae from beyond the Veil. They lived in the Veil, and yeah, the Fae Lord sent them out into the mortal realm 500 years ago to help with fighting the god of corruption. The makeup was, it's a lot for Havela. You have to do white on all exposed skin, because they're pale. Long, sort of pointed ears and horns of some kind, and any black markings you want to give them, dark lips, and dark eyes. So they're like fairly makeup intensive, but they also get some cool skills. They get access to the Veil magic tree for free. So as a racial, they get access to the sphere of magic that is like the Veil magic. So we get that for free, which is cool. And we're immune to fear and terror effects because we're from the fucking realm of nightmares. You know? So all Havela are kind of otherworldly and spooky, you know? And they're all named after feelings. They're all named after feelings. All the Havela, they don't have names like Steve or John or, you know, Amy or whatever. They're named after feelings. So there were 3 Havela at this game. Their names were Envy, Trepidation, and Zeal. I was Zeal, by the way. But the other 2 are Envy and Trepidation. I mean, come on, it's so cool. I love it. I may be biased because I kind of suggested this naming scheme for them, but like, I really like it. It's spooky. It's otherworldly. I'm into it. So, yeah. I was Zeal. She was a firecaster. You know, basically like a DPS mage was the build. I made a character that threw packets that did lots and lots of damage. That was the whole point, basically. So she was a firecaster, and she cast large fireballs that the whole point was to make them unstoppable and then throw them and kill things. That was the whole point of her. So, I had no idea what this character was going to be like, because I hadn't really written them. For those of you who were here on like the Friday beforehand, we did the makeup test on stream and stuff, and like, I hadn't really designed the character, you know, like they didn't have a personality or a sort of like a feeling to them or anything. Like they were like, Zeal was my only thing to go on. So she was very like outspoken and social, and she cared a lot about things. That was kind of the vibe I went for eventually. So the story got set up, And we got some backstory linked in with other player characters. Like, Will took us aside before the game started and went like, okay, so you're going to be with this person, and they're involved with this thing, and you're going to be, you know, like, kind of worked with us on some backstory. So there was, like, a little bit of, like, connection between the various player characters, which is nice. I like that. So Zeal was friends with a lovely Osselin lady named Asara. Osselin are sort of like cat people. You know, so she had sort of the kind of cheetah-looking makeup going on, which I was into. So I was friends with a lovely Osselin lady named Asara, who is a member of the Flames of Kalaya. And they're like an organization of do-gooder Knights Order kind of people. And the idea was that I had hooked up with her because I was going to become sort of the Veil expert for them, because they don't have a lot of Veil casters or Havela or anything like that. So I was going to join up with them and become their expert of the Veil, you know. And we were waiting at this tavern called the Stone's Throw for our dear friends from the Flames to arrive. Now, the Stone's Throw is a tavern that is within a stone's throw distance of where the ancient hero 500 years ago sent the god of corruption away, or that's what I heard, you know. I wasn't entirely sure if that was like a fact, but I sort of treated it like a fact after I heard that was the lore thing, which is good. Maybe I spread misinformation. Who knows? But that's what I heard. So it was the stone's throw. It was a stone's throw away from where the god of corruption was banished to their eternal combat with Jezeravel, the champion from the first game, and Jacob's character from the first game, which is, you know. So we were already at the tavern. There's a couple of us, like, at the tavern already, waiting for people or sitting around and drinking and having a good time, because there's, like, a big storm brewing outside. And it's the biggest storm we've ever seen, and we're expecting more people to be pushed into the tavern, you know, by the storm, because it's a strong building. It's made of stone. It could probably survive this storm, whereas other more fragile shelters may not keep people safe enough that they don't die. So the premise was we're all in this building because it's the place to shelter from the storm. And there was a sound system playing, like, loud thunder and lightning and rain sounds the whole game. The whole game. Like, there was this massive storm outside. The only time it was a problem when I was trying to sleep, because I was right next to one of the fucking speakers. But it was alright. It was alright. I still got to sleep. It's fine. But, so we're sitting at a table. We're drinking together. It's me, Asara, Jiro, who's this, like, sovereign who seemed nice enough. I don't really know much about him. This is just a dude. Isalora, who was an Ebos, which are like the sort of elves that took the corruption into themselves when they closed the breach 500 years ago. So they're sort of the dark elves of the setting. And I think that was our party at the table. Oh, and a bard, a really annoying bard NPC who I really wanted to kill, like, immediately, but my character wasn't the kind of person who hated them. Just me personally. Guitar strumming characters with fancy hats, I immediately want to, like, throw fireballs at them. But I had to suppress that urge, because Zeal is a nice person, and I'm not. So anyway, we're hanging out at the table, we're drinking, juice that is, represents the alcohol served at the tavern. And there's one fellow sitting at another table with his, like, hood up, being all mysterious and, like, huddling alone while we sort of, like, get into character and try and, like, find our position, because I don't think any of us really had, like, a good grasp on who the characters were yet. Like, it's a one-shot, so it's like, I don't know who I am, I didn't plan this, really, sort of thing. So it was nice to sort of have this little tavern conversation portion before we got into anything where I could feel the character out. And once I was feeling comfortable, and people had started to disperse and new people had started to come in and people were, like, sitting down everywhere and stuff was going on, I got up from the table and I said to Asara, like, I'm gonna go see our mysterious patron, or not mysterious patron, our mysterious friend over there, sitting with his hood up and all that. I'm very sociable, like very sociable. I'll be able to get a conversation out of him for sure, you know? So Sarah nods. She's like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. And I get up and I walk over to the table where Mr. Dark and Mysterious is sitting, and I sit down across from him, and it's Jacob's character, my friend Jacob, who some of you may know from other stories as the player of Daegrin and the player of Jazera, and a person that I roleplay with a lot. Like, very confident that it will be a good scene when Jacob is around. But anyway, so I sit down across from him, and he's got his hood up, and I go, well, hello, Mr. Dark and Mysterious. How nice to see you. I just think you looked a little bit lonely over here, and I don't like letting people sit by themselves and mope, especially in such weather. You know, I think we should get to know each other. Let's have a conversation. I'd like to know more about you. I'm Zeal, by the way. You know, and offer to shake his hand, kind of thing. And he sticks his hand out from his cloak and like shakes my hand, but he's like keeping it close to his cloak. And then he's like, "Oh, Zeal, what do you do?" You know, I'm like, "Well, I have just joined up with the Flames of Kalaya. I am an expert on the Veil, veteran of 500 years ago when we closed the breach. I was one of the first Havela through. Very proud of that fact. Very proud. I did what I could to help this mortal realm and seal corruption away forever. You know? And now, well, I'm just enjoying my time here. Just enjoying my time here in the mortal realm. There's so much to learn. There's so many books to read, so many libraries to visit, so many people to talk to. It's fantastic. But other than the Veil, I am a powerful caster of the flame. Thus the flames, you know? and he goes, "Oh, really? Well, maybe there's something you can help me with." And like takes out some silver from his pouch and like slides it across the table to me, and I'm like, you want to hire me for fire-related things? Yes, actually. And he like pulls the cloak aside, and he's got manacles on. And he's a sovereign, so he has like a number on his face, and he's got manacles on. And I'm like, "Ooh, you naughty boy, what have you been doing?" You know, like, I don't know if I can help you with that. I don't know if there's much I can do about that. But yeah, it depends what you've done. You know, and he's like, "I promise, I've been falsely accused, escaped my captors in the storm. I just need to get these manacles off." You know, I'm like, "Well, I hate to see someone imprisoned. People should be free to do as they want. So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take your silver, like pull it across the table and like put it in my pocket, and I'm going to help you." And I grab the excuse me. I grab the manacles, and I incant Sathalabria, Forge's Heat, and break the manacles, because Forge's Heat allows me to break things, basically. Like, if it hits a weapon or a shield, it'll break the weapon or shield. It's like, I melt it, basically, with fire. And he's free. He's got, like, a manacle on each wrist, basically. But the center piece, he's fine. He's free. And he's like, "Oh, thanks. You know, like, it's good to know somebody in here has got some morals." And you know, we kind of had a little conversation after that. His character's name is Avon, and he ended up being like a very, very, very very essential healer. We had two healers basically who were like bandage capable, and it was him and Azara, my Oscelin friend. So the two of them were our only healers. But but yeah, so things progressed as we chatted, and some people got into like fights with the barkeep, and like we had to check our weapons at the door, so they wanted their weapons back, and they were being all fucking belligerent about it, and people were getting into fights that they didn't need to get into. Like NPCs were getting, like nice NPCs were getting harassed basically, and I'm like, oh no, this is gonna go, oh god. Sort of thing. I wasn't too worried about the weapon check because I fucking throw fire. I don't need a stick. I gave him my stick. It's fine. You know? So, yeah. I don't know exactly what happened there, but what I do know is that some people tried to go into, like, the cellar area, because this whole building was represented as the tavern, and there's, like, a cellar area, and they tried to go in there, and there's, like, some horrible thing that came out of it, and there's like this big fight that happened, and corruption spawned, and I got told that there's not been any corruption for like 500 years. Like the god of corruption was sealed away in a eternal fight with Jazera. So like Eliu, the god of corruption, was sealed away for 500 years in an eternal fight with Jazera, and seeing corruption come back means that something bad has happened. You know, and there was a lot of like, oh fuck, and like we had to try and kill this big NPC, and like a bunch of stuff happened. I'm not entirely sure what went down during this portion, because I may have like sat at a table and talked with someone for this portion while stuff was going on. Tammy's character, who is a Dark Fawn, whose name I cannot remember. I'm very sorry, Tammy. We talked a lot during this period where like the early stuff was happening, and tried to like figure out what we were doing. And this like, there's like this big monster. I threw some fire at it, and then people were saying there's like a pool of black corruption in the basement, and so I like went to look, and so there was like just several black cloths laid out with like sort of Christmas lights around it. It's a perfect representation of like a black pool of goo. And, you know, people tried to get rid of it, and we couldn't. It just stayed there. It wasn't going anywhere, sort of thing. And then in the next fight, someone died. It was Josh's character, Dracus, died. And we were all really concerned by that, obviously, because people dying sucks. And if we're fighting the corruption, we're going to need everybody we can. But to our surprise, he came back through that puddle of corruption, that puddle of, like, black goo. He resurrected and came up through it and was okay, was fine. And this is the first time in the history of, like, the world of Chronicles that, like, that has happened. Like, people have resurrected. So it was like this big event where we were like, what the fuck? Like, are you some kind of corrupted beast? Are you a copy? Are you a doppelganger? Like, I kept my eye out, you know? But then it started happening more frequently. People would die, they would come back through the pool, and I couldn't explain it. People kept talking to me like I knew what the fuck was happening. 'Cause my whole roleplay, my whole setup with this character was like, I am a veteran of when we fought the corruption before. Like, I was one of the first through the veil. I know things about the past. I know things about the corruption. I know the history, sort of thing. And I did, sort of on an out-of-game level to a certain degree. So it was easy for me to, like, fill in information for people who weren't there in the first beta game, stuff like that. But, like, I got into this unenviable position where when people needed to understand or know something, they came to me for some reason. Like, that was not what I meant to. I didn't want to be sort of like in charge of anything or directing anything or making decisions or whatever, but lo and behold, I found myself in that situation. And so, like, we fought, like, waves of these corrupted monsters, and like, they were very dangerous and very scary, and they came at us really hard. I'll talk more about, like, sort of the goods and the bads at the end. I just want to get through, like, the entirety of the narrative first, sort of thing. And yeah, I was like master of exposition, you know? When people are like, what is this? I'm like, well, the god Eliu, the god of corruption, is in an eternal battle with the champion Jazera. He can't be free. But maybe one of them is won. And they're influencing it from the prison? I don't know. You know, like, this kind of stuff where, like, I'm trying to like fill in lore gaps and like answer questions with theoreticals that like I don't have the answer to and they don't have the answer to, but I have like the background to make up an answer. So I don't know. I tried as hard as I could. Anyway, we got through all this business. And fought a lot of waves of bad guys and a lot of stuff happened and there's kind of all this kind of stuff going on, and we started getting messages through the veil, and the cool thing about the veil is like only people with veil casting can see into the veil, and anything that exists in the veil has like a purple ribbon on it. So it exists in the veil. You can only see it if you can see into the veil if it has a purple ribbon on it. And we kept finding these notes, and they were notes like "Hello, children," and like "There is no escape from this nightmare that you find yourself in," and "Did the world miss me?" Stuff like that. And I'm like, oh god, like the god of corruption has gotten into the veil, hasn't he? He's gotten into the veil somehow, and he's doing stuff from the veil. The prison has grown and has encompassed some of the veil, and he's like freed himself, and he's influencing stuff from the veil, which is bad for me because I'm from there, and like the Fey Lord is there, and you know, like whatever. So my first response was like, well, I don't know what's happening. We're getting messages. I'm gonna contact the Fey Lord Ortho, the creator of the Havela. The Lord High motherfucking honcho of the Veil, you know, like king shit of the Veil, basically. And so I went to Will in plot camp, and I went like, Will, I want to contact this out of game talk, you know what I mean? Will, I want to contact the Fey Lord. I was like, okay, how are you gonna do that? I'm like, well, we go to the Veil when we sleep, so I'm gonna sleep, or not sleep. I'm gonna like pretend to sleep, basically, but you know, come to me when you feel it's time. And I'm gonna create like a place for him to meet me in the Veil in my dream, and then we can talk there, you know. And he's like, all right, yeah, go do the role play, and I'll come get you when it's time to, when I have time to do something with it. So I spent probably about half an hour like sleeping, basically. Then I was like, okay, I've crafted the place in the Veil, and I haven't gotten any messages back, so Will will come to me when it's time. And I got up and, you know, was talking to more people and defending against the waves of fucking shit that came up, and like people found out there was a giant spider cave in the basement with a bunch of aether in it, and we found a rite of purity. It's like a ritual, basically, that we had to perform a certain amount of tasks and spend a certain amount of aether, and we could cast this rite of purity that would like cleanse all the lesser corruption in the area. A lesser corruption, not greater corruption, so it wasn't super useful, but we found that rite. We ended up finding a couple of rites over the course of the game that were very interesting. And I like the way that the ritual system works in Chronicles, in terms of that like anybody can really participate if they are a part of the listed people. But that's not important right now. That's a previous part, or a further part of the story later. So I'm standing around like talking to some people, and Will comes up in a white headband and touches me on the shoulder and says, "You fall asleep." And so I'm in the middle of a conversation, and I just flop, hit the ground, you know, like sleeping. People are like, what the fuck is going on? You know, like I have healers coming over to check me in, and he whispers in my ear like some setup for the Fey Lord. Like you see the Fey Lord standing in the distance, and he says to you like, Zeal, something's gone wrong. Hold out as long as you can. I'm going to send help. I was like, okay, what's happening? And he's like, I'm not sure. And then that was it, basically. And then I woke up, and everybody's like, are you okay? Are you doing okay, Zeal? And I'm like, get a hand up, and I go like, the Fey Lord says he's sending reinforcements. We just have to hold out. And people will look at me like, well, how long? I don't know. He didn't tell me how long. He just said to hold out. Okay? All right, okay. How long do you think he's gonna be? I don't know. Time works differently in the Vale. It is the land of dreams. I cannot predict when the Fey Lord will do anything. I'm just a Havela. I don't presume to know the Fey Lord's thoughts. You know, it's just fun roleplay to have, like, where you're trying to, like, explain something and people want more information than you have been given. This happened to me a lot, okay? This happened to me a lot, because the next thing I did was go check the pool, the, like, black pool, and sort of, like, kneel by it and like, try and figure out, oh no, we got the Rite of Purity first. We got the Rite of Purity before this happened. And then we were looking at the options for the Rite of Purity, and there are 3 options, basically. You have to choose between one of them, and you appease one god, basically, and then the rite is done. But, like, each god had different requirements. So, like, we could appease End, the god of death, you know, by having someone come close to, like, have a near-death experience, and then have another person die forever and join End. And then End will cleanse the area of lesser purity. Or lesser corruption, right? Which is, like, a pretty high price. And the second one was Halagia, I think, which was, like, burn your most important possession in a fire, and then have a second person burn everything they own in a fire. And then they'll be happy, right? And they'll do the ritual. And the third one, and I was so happy to see this because, as you guys know, or maybe you don't, I don't know, I wrote the demons for this game. I got sort of contracted to write some demon stuff. And the demons in Chronicles are all, you know, very powerful. There's 5 demons total, basically. There aren't any lesser demons. There's just these, like, 5 greater demons who all have mortal servants, basically. But the last one was to appease the Resplendent, kill someone and drink their blood. All right. Cool. And the Resplendent is one of my demons. My demons all have titles. The Resplendent, the Masked, the Ironclad, the Charitable, and the Fury. But yeah, so those were our 3 options for the Rite of Purity. And there was a lot of debate over what we were going to do and who we were going to do it for, but we also needed enough Aetherite and a diamond and a Celestia, I think it was, like some kind of object to do it. So we had to go into the mines underneath the tavern, the old Aetherite mines, that had, like, spider webs and giant spiders and shit in it, so we had to go in there and, like, get the Aetherite off the webs. And Aetherite was represented by these little glow sticks, that were, like, stuck in the web, so it was, like, glowing. And the web was, like, tape that had been sort of, like, mashed together and strewn across, like, a bunch of poles and chairs and all this stuff, like... So it was kind of sticky and, like, transparent, and in the dark it was really immersive. Like, in terms of the quote-unquote spider caves I've been in at LARP, it was the best one that I've ever experienced, sort of, in terms of the representation of such a place. You had to be really careful, because you didn't want to, like, run into all this, like, tape, basically. And there were, like, small spiders that, like, shot poison, and, like, we couldn't hit them because they were small and in the shadows, and it was just, like, poison shooting. And, like, a big spider or 2 that were, like, really, really strong and dangerous. So what generally happened was, for the one where we got all the Aetherite, we went in, one person distracted the spider, and the rest of us all, like, ran through the place, like, ducking under webs and tables and, like, vaulting over stuff and, like, grabbing all the Aetherite that we could find. because they're glow sticks. You can see them in the dark. Like aetheryte is a glowing magical rock, you know? And you could see them in the dark, and we went through the caves and like grabbed as much as we could and then got out of there before we died of poison, right? It was cool. It was fun. And we got all that stuff together, and then there was this big debate about like which ritual we're gonna perform to do the rite of purification. And we found another rite, which is somebody like got puked out of the pool. This like corpse got puked out of the black pool, and they had a rite of extraction, which is a rite to like send someone to a safe place, and a rite of storage, I think, or like a rite of vault creation, which is like you make a small space where you can store things in like an extra planar location, you know, like it doesn't exist physically and you can access it through the rite sort of thing. So we found those on a corpse, but I was really interested in like what the black pool was gonna do, because it had been the vector for people resurrecting, but people were saying like when they were resurrecting, they were hearing like Iliu's voice. He was telling them that like if they swore to be a champion of corruption, then he would let them live, and that like no one was gonna make it out of here, and that eventually everybody would fall to this like new corruption. That he was in the veil, you know, and influencing things from a much larger prison now than before. And that the realm of dreams was gonna be his, and like all this other shit that I like heard from other people. I died once, and I had a conversation with Iliu where he was basically like, "Do you want to say yes? Do you want to kneel? Do you want to be a champion of corruption?" And I was like, "How about you shove your champion of corruption deal right up your ass?" That's how Zeal kind of was. It was sort of like everything. Corruption is worse than everything, you know? So in terms of like her scale of things, people were like, we can't consort with a demon because that's bad. But I'm like, but corruption is worse. So if we're consorting with a demon to get rid of corruption, then that's fine. That kind of stuff, you know? She's like, I'd rather see this whole building and all its occupants, including myself, burn to the ground before I let this corruption spread. That kind of shit. She was that kind of person. I mean, her name was Zeal. What are you gonna do? So, I wanted to see what the pool would do. So I like knelt by the pool. And I sat there for a while. I didn't go to plot camp or anything. I just sat there, I knelt there, and I was thinking about what this could mean, basically, and just trying to have like a quiet moment of roleplay to myself. I didn't expect anything to come out of it. It's just a dark place with a cool fizz rep in front of me, this pool, and I was gonna head back upstairs soon enough. You know, it's just like a little bit of alone time to try and figure out what the fuck I was gonna do. And then Will showed up next to me and said like, a golden hand reaches out of the pool towards you. So there's like this golden hand reaching out of the pool. I'm like, I take the hand? Like, while I'm sitting there, this golden hand reaches out of the pool, and I take the hand, and it pulls me into the pool. Like, I fall fucking head first into this pool. And Will says, like, you find yourself in sort of a void, like a black void. And in front of you is Jezeravel, the champion, who is fighting against Iliu. And you can see with like one hand he's trying to hold this big framework of like light and good, you know, like sort of holding it with one hand, and with his other hand he's offering you an item, like a globe of some kind, and he says like, take this. If you put it into the pool, you can stave off corruption for a few hours. You know, like and I was like, okay, all right, I take it. And then immediately I was expelled from the pool once more and sploosh, you know, like up onto the place I had been before. I got like no information, but it's like, it's Jezera, the champion. I know this person. They're a good person. They are giving me a thing that will help us to make sure the corruption doesn't show up for a few hours. Like, we don't get continually inundated by fucking enemy soldiers, basically. And I went upstairs and I had this globe. And it's like this globe with like sort of like fuzz around it, like fur around it, and it's pulsing with like light. It's a really cool fizz wrap. It's about as big as like a soccer ball, and it's pulsing with light, sort of like, you know, sort of thing. Yeah, when the good and righteous good person gives you a holy MacGuffin, you fucking take it, right? And so I have this thing, and I go upstairs, and I'm like, I got this. People are like, what the fuck is that? And I'm like, it is an orb. It is an orb of purity that we can put into the pool, and it will stop the corruption for a few hours. You know, like, it will solidify the pool, or whatever. And people were like, what, how many hours is a few hours? I'm like, I don't know. I don't get specific information from the, like, gods and demigods that I talk to. They just give me things or tell me stuff, and I tell you exactly what I know. And, like, people are like, well, what'll it do if we smash it? I don't know, but I wouldn't. I was told to put it in the pool. You know? Like... Oh, fuck. People were like, we need to put it in a safe place. I'm like, the safest place it can be is in my hands. You know, all that kind of stuff. Like, all that kind of thing. And eventually we agreed that, like, when we were going to go to bed, I would put, or, like, people were going to sleep, I would put this thing into the pool so that we could have a night's sleep where we didn't get fucking inundated by horrible corruption monsters, you know? And that's what we ended up doing. And it solidified the pool, and... you know, made it so that the corruption stuff couldn't get through, which is cool. It's like a little way to explain that, you know, NPCs need sleep and so do we, sort of thing. It's a way to explain away why we're not getting attacked all night, that kind of stuff. I'm into that kind of like narrative where you can figure stuff out like that. But so late at night, people were trying to decide how to perform the Rite of Purity. And what we were gonna do and who we were gonna perform it to. And we ended up deciding, it took us hours of like sitting and debating and people being stubborn or not, but we eventually decided that it would be End that we sacrificed. We sacrifice a person has a near-death experience and another person dies forever. I was not on board with this plan, especially because the people I like, well, one of the people I like, Tammy's character, her Dark Fawn, was the person who wanted to die forever, like a fucking martyr. I was not into it. But people said, like, End is the strongest god on this list. Like, she has an investment in making sure that death works the way it's supposed to, and people resurrecting like this is not how it works, you know? That kind of stuff. And eventually I washed my hands of it because I didn't want to be the person like holding up the discussion any longer. Because I was like, any of the other choices are better, but people were like, we need to sacrifice to End. You know? I'm like, alright, fine. So they went and did it, and I followed them and sort of watched and tried to help a little bit when the rite was like, they were like, so we kill this person and then we leave them to die forever? I'm like, no, one person dies close to death and the other one dies forever. It's not one person does both things. You can't do that. Sort of people and rights. What are you going to do? So that happened, and Tammy's character died forever. Sacrificed herself to purge the corruption. And we got some of our like corruption back. Like, some people had been corrupted by passing through the pool, and that lesser corruption was purged, you know, by this rite. And came and took the soul of Tammy's character, and rang a bell, because End has no voice, only the tolling of a bell, because she gave her voice to the champion as a weapon. 500 years beforehand. There you go. And that was it. Like, we got all lesser corruption purged in the building, and then we went to bed. People went to sleep. There's the loud sound of thunder through speakers all night. It was loud. And and then in the morning we were awoken by corruptive things bursting from people who still had, like, you know, like, their corruption had been purged and it had leaked out basically onto the floor. And corruptive stuff attacked us in the morning, woke us all up. We had to get out of bed very quickly. I was throwing fire instantaneously, you know, once I knew I needed to. And then it was sort of like we were holding out. We were just holding out and, like, hoping and waiting and stuff. And we had the right of extraction, which is a right that sends someone to safety, right? And a lot of us are thinking, like, we're not going to make it. A lot of people have died. Like, we're not going to get out of here. And so we have this right. We have the eighth right to cast it. Who are we going to send? You know, who are we going to send to, like, tell everyone, basically, about what has happened? And that corruption is back, and that Eliu is in the Veil, and that people need to be careful and wary, and that, like, this is going to spread from here. This kind of thing, like, very serious, like, proclamation of doom kind of shit, right? And eventually, after much discussion, and by much discussion, I mean, I got a mystic to throw the bones for me to decide. She said I was gonna go, that I should go. So they were gonna send Zeal to warn the civilizations of the world that the corruption had returned. You know? And in the end, it's a good choice, because she was a veteran of the first conflict. People know her. She's, like, sort of has a rep, right? She's not just some nobody telling you that the end times are coming. Like, she's a Havela. They know what they're talking about generally, and, like, aren't much for, haha, I'm totally joking, necessarily. You know, she had a lot to offer to that situation. But there was a problem. We needed to do the right. I needed people of a certain star sign. So we had one Cielin and two people under the star sign of Voss. It was Mike's character and Jacob's character, who were both born in the star sign of Voss. And they needed to chant. They needed to recite a chant. But they couldn't read magic, so they couldn't read it off the scroll. So I had to transcribe it. And while I was transcribing the first part of the chant, the windows of the storm picked up, and the windows of the fucking tavern exploded in, and, like, ice and lightning and stuff, like, were striking in, and we had to retreat to the basement. And I'm like, I have this scroll in one hand and, like, a bunch of paper in the other, and I'm trying to, like, transcribe stuff. And stuff while we're, like, running down the stairs, and I find, like, a place to hole up, and I start writing, like, all that kind of stuff. And I needed to transcribe it 3 times so that these guys wouldn't mess up the incant. But I was transcribing so hard that I did get some stuff wrong in the transcribing, and we had to, like, improvise a little bit. You know, like, my meter was off on one line because I put over mountains instead of, like, crossing mountains or something like that. I don't remember, but, like, it didn't not all of them matched because I was working so fast. But so I got this chant, and I gave it to them. And they surrounded me, and we practiced the chant, and then like, there's all this shit happening around us. There's, like, fighting happening over there. The corruption's busting up the stairs, and then, like, Dracus and the Legionnaires are, like, fighting, and while all this is happening, they're trying to defend this right where I have, like, a notebook that we found, and the Inquisitor's handbook, and the other right that we found in my bag, and all this stuff, and, like, proof that I was here, and, like, proof that this is real kind of stuff. And they're trying to defend, like, the point where they're sending me away. and they're chanting, they're doing the chant together, like line by line, chant, chant, repeat, repeat. And then at the end, the ritual marshal goes, how much focus do you expend? How much focus do you expend? How much focus do you expend? And ask them to spend their energy, right, to cast, which is a thing you had to do, but I totally missed on the ritual scroll when I was reading it first because of the way that it's set up, and the handwriting. But so I was like, fuck, you know, like I hope we have enough energy. But one of the guys was like, 0. I spent 0. This is Jordy's CLN character, who's just like, me and him were butting heads the whole game, basically. He's like, I spent 0. Like, fuck. And so the ritual marshal goes like, does nothing. Okay, cool. Well, we need more energy. You and you. Who's like gonna give me more energy? And people come and like give over energy because there's a mage power called Ebb and Flow that allows you to give focus to other people. So they give energy to my chanting folk. And like I get another person in to chant who can do so, and they spend all their energy, and we eventually get it done, but we had to do it like twice while all this fighting was happening, and I was so tense because people were being like fucking obtuse about it, and like, whoa, well, if you don't need me, then fine, you know, like, he spends 0 focus, and people are like, get the fuck in here, you know, like, cast shit. And he's like, well, you need me to cast it, so I'm saving my focus to fucking save myself and fight for myself. I don't want to spend it to send you away, but you can't cast it without me. So, you know, make your choice. I'm like, fuck. So much like tense argument in a tense situation in a nail-biting, like, us getting murdered scenario, you know? Yeah. So eventually we got it done. And the ritual marshal, they finished the chant. Ritual marshal goes, how much focus do you expend? 30. How much focus do you expend? 20. How much focus do you expend? 12. How much focus do you expend? You know, like all that stuff. And people spend their shit. And then he just goes, you disappear. And so I go out of game, and I walk down to plot camp, basically, with all the stuff that I had. And you know, he basically says, like, while I'm in plot camp, he goes, like, you're in a stasis bubble until the end of game. So you're out of game now. It was about an hour till the end of game anyway at this point, so no problem by me. Like, you're out of game. Your character's gone. We'll figure out where you end up in, like, the debrief, basically. Still haven't had that debrief, but that's it. It was yesterday, so I'll just wait until Will gets to me, sort of thing. But yeah, so my character got teleported out of there. Then what I heard happened was basically they fought the corruption for as long as they could. Then there was some divine intervention by Jazera, and like people got their minds back after being controlled by the corruption, and they were okay, and then people had like a bit of a rest. But then the Vanguard showed up. These are like the Ebos, like the Dark Elf Death Squad, like the people who were on the front lines against the corruption 500 years ago. These are the fucking elite badasses of like purge the corruption and purge anything adjacent to the corruption, you know? And they came through and they killed everyone, right? They killed everyone because like all of this like corruptive nonsense. Somebody had gone to like warn them, basically. One of the Dark Elf NPCs had like left and survived and like gotten a message to the Vanguard, and the Vanguard showed up and fucking killed everyone. Just a purge. Just to like burn this place to the ground. It's corrupted, sort of thing. Yep, Medieval SEAL Team 6. Yeah, exactly. And so the last scene of the game was everybody dead in the darkness, the pitch black of a room with no windows and no lights on. It was like a big hall, and we all were in there. I went in there out of game because I wanted to watch, but my character wasn't actually dead because I got away. But everybody else is in there, and it's so dark you can't see. Like so dark. And the voice of Eliu speaks to everyone collectively and says, "This is your last chance. Here in death with me. Kneel And if you kneel, you will become a champion of corruption. And you will join me in my destruction of this world. If you don't, well, I could always use more mindless fodder. Was basically what he said. And then out of game, Will was like, if you're gonna kneel, kneel. And you can hear like a bunch of people shifting in the darkness, but you can't see who it is. You can't see what's going on. So it's like, if you're gonna kneel, kneel. People shift around. Some people don't. You can't tell. It's dark. And then he says like, out of game. Everybody stand back up. Everybody gets back up. And then the game was over. And he turns the lights on and he's like, that's game! Game is over. You know? And he's like, the first beta game gave us some heroes. The second beta game gives us some villains. You know, like these characters will be important during the actual release. Like these characters who bent the knee to corruption, you know, may come back in terms of NPCs that are, you know, dangerous and evil, and NPCs from the first game, you know, who are like legendary heroes in the bloodlines of heroes and so forth, from 500 years before, and so that, yeah, it was like kind of a cool setup. Like I was really into it. Yeah, like everybody died, but some people who agreed to be evil are gonna be like lieutenants of the corruptive army, you know. Which is awesome. I'm pretty into it. Anyway, narratively, that was the whole game. Let me give you some like goods, bads, and uglies, right? Well, let me give you some goods, bads, and uglies of the game. I really like Chronicles as a system. I feel it is pretty solid. I feel like there are definitely some spells that are like dead and useless. Like nobody would ever take them. Like, why take any of the stuff in Primal that is like assess health, assess poison, when you can just take like the medical aid skill, or like be a better healer than that. I just like don't think that they're things that people would necessarily do. Maybe they would. I definitely wouldn't. I think that there's still some balancing to do in terms of the spells and in terms of the spell spheres. I think that too many of the spells are similar as well. Like, you have a lot of life effects across, like, a lot of different spheres. And, like, a lot of the same sort of, like, there's a fear effect in, like, 3 of the spheres, I think. Or, like, 2 of them, at least. Which, I don't know. I think it could like do with some tweaking. Life effect, yeah, like you know, bringing people back from their death count. You know, in Veil you have one where like once they get up and the spirit is moving to the res circle or whatever, you can see their spirit and like pull them back from the Veil. In Fire, there's a resurrection spell that is like full health, full armor, Phoenix. You know, like they rise from the dead as like a newly created version of themselves. In War, there's like a revival spell. In the War domain, there's like a revival spell that just like brings you back up. Yeah, and then like the one that has healing in it, the Primal Sphere, like that has healing in it, doesn't have a resurrection spell from the death count. I don't know. It seems weird to me. And, like, Blood has one that, like, resurrects yourself. You know, like, when you die, if you have this spell on you, you resurrect. So there's, like, a lot of coming back from the dead type stuff. I feel like maybe too much. But, I don't know. I'm not the game balancer, so to speak. I really like the way that Chronicles handles weapons. I really like the idea that any character can pick up any weapon and deal 1 damage with it, because it makes fucking no sense to me that my mage couldn't grab a sword and use it as well as they could use a stick. You know what I mean? They might not be able to use it to its full potential, but everyone can swing every weapon for at least 1 damage. Because stick them with the pointy end is really all you need to know, right? To do a minimum. Which I'm into. You know, it's real cool. What else? Good. I really like the way that the story was woven, like in terms of like, Will, you did a really good job in like the like heroes and villains and that kind of thing. I like the way that you played the beta games, and I'm really looking forward to the release. I think that the game will be different in a campaign setting than it will be in a one-shot setting, which I'm really excited to explore. The idea of like consistent characters and characters that like have their own agendas and motives rather than being part of like a big fight against something or a big fight against something. Like, I'm looking forward to having a character with a little more autonomy than like the small scenarios have allowed, but that's something that's like just for me. I like campaigns better than I like one-shots. Let's put it that way. You know, it's fun to drive your character like a stolen car occasionally. Zeal was a little bit like that. I just like threw her off a cliff as much as possible. And Isolde was like that too. But I'm looking forward to playing whatever comes next. Yeah. And like having more of a slow boil, like a longer plot line. Because I think that your longer plot line will be good. You know, like I think the Chronicles longer plot line will be good. So I'm excited about that. Some stuff that I would consider bad. I don't like going over this stuff because like I feel like mostly I had a really good time. Like it was a really good game and I really liked it. Stuff that I didn't like, if these NPCs, if these people that you've like got on your NPC team are gonna be like your NPC team, they need to know the rules better. and they need to like do them correctly. There was a lot of like unsafe fighting going on and like a lot of like running real fast, like faster than you should in a hall where people are on the ground dead and like stumbling backwards and tripping over things and vaulting tables and shit. Like, oh boy, like I was concerned. Yeah. So, you know, the kind of stuff where somebody gets up on you so far that they're basically like standing on your toes and you can't safely back away while they swing boffers around you into your back. Like, that's not fighting, it's bullshit when it comes to like actually following LARP rules. That was probably my main complaint. I feel like NPCs, or some NPCs, not all of them, but some NPCs were going full tilt because it was a game where going full tilt meant killing us, and that was the point. Like, we were supposed to die, and like horrible things were supposed to happen to us. But you should be able to do that within the rules. I don't know. At least according to me. That's it. The other thing is, like, I don't know if everybody knew their weaknesses and their strengths, or if they had different stats or what, because all of them were the same NPC to me. Like, they all dressed the same. Like, all the corruptive monsters look the same. So if there were like packs where there were smaller ones and bigger ones, I don't know which ones were which or how to determine. But I threw spells at some and they died immediately, and I threw spells at some and they didn't. So either someone's not taking enough damage, or they have different stats and there's no way for me as a player to tell. Not that that's necessarily outside of design, but it was something that I was like, weird. Okay. You know, as I sort of like went through this. I had to restate the fact that my spells were unstoppable like 8 times. Resist magic does not work on them. Unstoppable means unstoppable. But that's okay. Like, it's a new system. Everybody's getting used to calls and stuff. It's just like one of those things where it's like, here's a spell, resist magic. No, not resist magic. It's unstoppable. Unstoppable. Like, fucking hell. But yeah. So there was that. Basically all my complaints are to do with like the way that things were played, not the way that the game went. I really like the game. I really like the system. I really like the lore and the I felt like I was the only person who fucking read anything, though. This is a personal complaint, just in general. I tried so hard. I tried so hard because people were asking me stuff about like the 500 years ago thing because I'd set my character up as this like expert. You know what I mean? I tried so hard to call everything by its correct name and make sure that I referred to things in the way that they were referred to in like the lore that we've seen. And to know what the gods were and what they did and who was what and all this thing, but like so many people didn't do any reading, and it was like, they're not elves, they're Avara, they're not orcs, they're Kor, they're not dark elves, they're Ebos, they're not elves with gems on their face, they're Cielans, you know, they're not Fawn, they're Gwiltfera, you know, like, just invest yourself, just a smidge, guys, just a tiny smidge, you know, like, be nice. If you're considering, like, living in a world for a weekend, know something about it. Even if it's just a little thing. Maybe your character is an ignorant fuck, but guess what? I'm sure you would know about your culture, the culture of the people that you are playing, you know? That kind of thing. I don't know, that's more for, like, my fellow players. You know what's really useful? If you read some shit. But that's, you know, that's not a criticism of the game. That's just, like, that's LARPs everywhere, right? Like, that's why I don't play Vampire, necessarily, because I don't know anything about... I couldn't read the, like, 80 source books that I would have to read to play Vampire the Masquerade effectively, and to know things that any vampire should know. Like, I can't live like that, you know? So I don't know. I don't really. That kind of stuff. Yeah. So there's a lot of things they're super cool about the game. I think that there's still balancing to do, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what, like, because we're on like 2.5 right now. I'm really looking forward to seeing what like 3.0 sounds like, or looks like, and I'm looking forward to seeing what another class looks like, because I've played a fighter, I've played a mage. Next up for the release, I'm gonna play a rogue. It'll be my first, like, quote-unquote rogue ever, in terms of, like, LARP stuff. So we'll see what it looks like. I'm interested in sort of doing that. Yeah, I played a martial adept the first game, and I played a magical evoker the second game. So I think the next one will be a cunning rogue, because the way that the class system works, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, is that there are 4 base selections. So you pick, like, cunning, learned, magical, or martial. And then there are, like, 8 or something, like, subsections. So you have, like, adept, brute, champion, wayfarer, rogue, agent, evoker, and artisan. I think I got them all. I might have missed 1 or 2, but, like, so you can be like a magical champion or like a magical adept or a magical artisan if you want, because the first choice determines how much your skills cost, and the second choice determines, like, a bunch of talents that you have access to. Yeah. Agents have an awesome talent where they get to, like, forego someone's death count, called Leave No Trace, where they basically go, like, shh, 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 and the person just, like, immediately dies instead of going through a death count. Super cool. I mean, learned is for, like, crafting and artisanship and making things and stuff. Oh, I forgot healer. Healer's in there as well. Healer's another selection that I forgot, which is part of the second selection of classes. So yeah, you pick like martial, magical, cunning, or learned, and then that determines how much your skills cost. And then the second selection is, like, getting a bunch of talents, you know? So you could be, like, a mage who's also a healer who has a lot of magic but can also bandage people. Or you could be, like, a person who's really good with a sword, but they're really good with a sword because all they do is spell strike. You know what I mean? Everything is, like, spell strike whatever, spell strike whatever. Like, instead of, like, striking for damage, they're a caster that strikes through their sword, you know? And stuff like that. Magical Evoker is basically like pure mage. Yeah, you are a mage's mage. You are the magiest thrower of magical magic that ever magicked. Just like Martial Champion is like, you're the best shield guy in the world. Like, nobody's gonna be able to push you over or knock you down. Like, you're as strong as the mountain, as they say. Stuff like that. Anyway, that's how I felt about Chronicles this weekend. It was a super cool narrative, marred by some out-of-game gripes about NPC stuff that I think, you know, like, some people have very different ideas of what the word safety means and what the word combat means. And I think it's important to get those things in line if those people are going to be NPCs for long periods of time. Yeah. I think that's it for stories today. We can talk about some LARP stuff at the end here if you guys want to like chat about things for a little while. But like this will be the part where I cut the bot off, sort of thing, for YouTube. So my YouTube friends, I'm sorry, you're gonna miss out on maybe some little live conversations and questions and stuff.